Hello there, Aubrey. How are you today?
I'm great, Lindsay. How are you?
Good. Aubrey, are you someone that often leaves online reviews when you buy a product or maybe if you go to a restaurant?
Very rarely. I have
Okay.
only left a couple of reviews in my entire life.
Mhm.
I should do it more. So a couple of times I've done it for friends who open a restaurant,
Oh, yeah,
and
sure.
I recognize they're like trying to get the word out, and I am genuinely impressed by the restaurant, the
Yeah, yeah,
food. So
yeah.
then I've left them a review.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then I've only left one negative review in my life
Okay. Yep.
when we were going to Disneyland and we went to a breakfast place called Huckleberries.
Uh-huh.
Now, huckleberries are from like the Mountain West.
The
I grew up
Mountain West,
picking
Montana.
huckleberries and they're
Okay.
delicious. They're like
Uh-huh.
very tart and yummy. And I was so excited to have to eat huckleberries at this restaurant in California. And they were not huckleberries, they were blueberries.
What a
And they were
scam.
charging more too. They were like, it was like an upsell to get huckleberries. So
Oh,
I was
no.
like, these are not huckleberries.
I'm
and
surprised that I think
I
I've
was
heard this
shocked.
story before, and you're clearly enraged by this, but I would be too because
I
I'm
was.
surprised that they thought they could get away with that. I mean,
I
people
know.
know the difference.
I
Yeah.
would think so, but maybe not. Maybe like a lot of people, if you haven't had a huckleberry, they look a lot like blueberries, so you would maybe not know. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
who eat there just don't know, but I knew and
Yeah.
I was livid and I
Yeah.
left a review about it.
Yeah.
But I've gone
Ye
back a couple times to look and people will comment about sort of making fun of me for caring so much.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, people
It's really
troll.
funny.
There's a lot of trolling of
Absolutely.
people troll, establishments sometimes in their reviews, and then people troll the reviewers
Yes.
too, right?
Totally. That's probably why I don't relieve a lot of reviews. I don't want to be made fun of for being upset about something.
That's a great slang to troll someone. It's a good one. So
Yes.
we'll come back to that another day. So Aubrey, what are we getting into in this? This is going to be a dynamic episode today for sure.
Yes, I am excited about this. So, part one of this episode, this series, we talked about higher scoring and idiomatic ways to say something is good or bad. You are
Hmm.
definitely going to need to convey that meaning on IELTS, but you can't just say good or bad. They're so low scoring. So, we
Hmm.
taught up to snuff, up to scratch, up to par, and fit the bill.
Got it.
And so, scroll up if you missed that. Be sure to hit follow if you're missing any of our amazing vocabulary episodes.
Hmm.
And we'll
Love
share
it.
the episode number at the end. So definitely stay to the end. But today we're going to use this vocabulary in part three answers.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this can come into action. And this is a huge part of our preparation plan for our listeners to be ready for IELTS. It's not just consuming the vocab and knowing what it means, it's practicing, right? And you can get
Absolutely.
the practice questions online in our course, Three Keys IELTS. We know the common questions that are asked on test day. So being ready and implementing them, not being lazy in our preparation, is huge. Okay.
Absolutely, right? Hearing today's Band 9 answers is huge for you to get a good example of how to
Yes.
use this vocabulary in a part three answer. This vocabulary could be used all over the speaking exam. Personal questions in part one, if you're describing something in part two, and
Yeah.
even in part three. Often these things that are sort of more general questions about society in general, you can still use idiomatic language.
Yeah, and Aubrey, I have a question about speaking part three here because we're going to get ready to do some sample answers. When we go to answer a speaking part three question, it's about society, right? It's about society, about how people behave and what happens on a societal level. Are we supposed to avoid telling specific stories from our lives? Is that more of a part two thing to do?
No,
What
that
do you
is a
think?
great question. And
Yeah.
this is a common misconception that students have that part three, you need to be
Hmm.
not speaking about yourself, not sharing personal
Okay.
experiences. And that is
Okay.
not the case. The
Okay.
same goes for writing task two. You're
Hmm.
still asked to draw from your personal experience. So you should be using personal examples.
Got
So
it.
often on a part three question, a great strategy is to answer the question about society as a whole, but then provide examples and details from your own experience, because
Okay.
that's where you're going to find details. It's going to be easier to describe what you have actually experienced yourself.
I love it. Okay, that's really good to know here. So when I answer these questions, I might dip into a story if it feels right in the flow of my answer. But yeah, we want to know the differences between speaking part two and speaking part three. Love it.
Yes, that's a great question. In fact, you will almost have to use personal examples because part three answers are longer, right?
Hmm.
Part one, it's like 3 to 5 sentences is about what you're aiming
Yeah.
for.
Okay.
Most part three answers are going to be about a minute long, right? Your part two
Hmm.
is 2 minutes, you're often given about a minute for part 3 questions, which they want you to develop a little more. They want to know, how can you connect your experience to the world at large?
Yes.
But the tricky thing about part 3, and we've talked about this before, is the timing. The examiner has to ask a certain amount of questions in the time that they have. So
Mm.
if some answers go a little longer or they're running short of time, before you hit that minute, they might interrupt you. They'll just say
Okay.
thank you and they'll ask another question. Don't
Yeah.
let it throw you off. If anything, that's good. It shows you have so much to say about it. They
Okay,
might
good.
just need to interrupt you so that they have time to ask all the questions they're required to ask.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. So, if we've been practicing this properly and we've been going through this multiple times, it won't surprise us when we do get interrupted, right?
Exactly. Right. So
Mhm.
Lindsay is going to go
Okay.
first here. And we want this to feel more like how the part 3 exam feels on the speaking test. Often here, when we provide these sample answers, we
Mhm.
ask one answer and
Oh, right.
immediately give feedback. So instead, this will look a little different. I'm going to ask Lindsay 3 questions in a row
Good.
subsequently, right? And then at the end of all 3, I will provide feedback about, I'll pull out some interesting vocabulary, intonation.
Mhm.
So this will feel a little bit more like the IELTS exam where you're just asked question after question without getting any feedback in between.
Okay, let's go for it, Aubrey. I am excited. Let's
All
do it.
right, let's
Okay.
go. We're going to give you 3 questions here. Ready?
Okay.
All right. What kinds of things do people write online reviews about in your country?
Yeah, that is a great question. Well, honestly, people write reviews about a lot of different things in my country. Now that we're in this new internet age, we can see it all over the place. When things aren't quite up to par, people like to write reviews for Airbnb stays. That's a really common one. I've also seen it's very common to leave reviews at a restaurant if your experience wasn't up to snuff, for example. Uh, when we book a tour, when I travel, I love to book things like bike tours or food tours. And the first thing I do is I go to the reviews to see, is this a legitimate tour? Is this going to be worth my money? So Yelp is another common review site. I think that was more previously used in another time. But we write reviews about lots of different aspects of our experience. Delivery people, when people deliver food, all kinds of things.
Nice. Why do some people write online reviews?
Yeah, this is super interesting. I think the truth is people write reviews when they have a strong experience, whether it's negative or positive. And when they have a neutral experience, it was just pretty good, they tend not to write reviews. So if my experience at a restaurant just doesn't fit the bill, it's just not as good as I expected it to be, I personally wouldn't necessarily do this unless it was terrible, but some people would tend to go and write a review on that. Or if you had an amazing experience and it definitely was indeed up to par and it blew your mind how great the service was, or at an Airbnb, for example, you might be likely to leave a review in that case.
Do you think that online reviews are good for both shoppers and companies?
I actually really do. I think this is a great way. Online reviews are a great way to make sure that the quality of things stays high. And also, I believe on a site like Airbnb, the actual people that rent the place, are we reviewed as renters too? I think we are, aren't we? And so if it's a double-sided marketplace, I think it's good. Or for example, Upwork, which is a place where we can find freelancers online remotely. Both the employer and the employee are reviewed. So it kind of holds people to account. It creates a safe environment where there's a lot of trust when we wouldn't otherwise really know who we're working with. So yeah, I do think that online reviews are good for whether it's shoppers, or employers, for example, or companies or employees. I think it's a great idea to keep a positive and safe environment.
Thank you. Ooh, amazing answers,
Whew,
Lindsay. That was fantastic.
thank
Part 3
you.
is definitely a little trickier, right? You're not
Yes.
just sharing like, oh, your opinion about
Yes.
personal things. Yeah, but well done.
Mm.
I'm excited to dive into so many things that made these answers band 9. So on
Okay.
that first answer, notice how she began it. First of all, with a quick filler that's like, this is an interesting question. Give yourself just a second to think of what you want to say. And then
Yeah.
to say, well, honestly, these linking phrases phrases are vital, and a lot
Yeah.
of students don't think to use them. We don't use linking phrases as much in speech in English, in
Mhm.
conversations. They
Mhm.
are necessary for IELTS. You have to transition between ideas. You need to introduce your thoughts with linking phrases. And that's
Mhm.
really important for your fluency and coherence score. And again, with your third answer, you started with, I actually really do. These linking phrases to start answers and
Mhm.
transition between ideas are really boosting those fluency scores.
Yeah, yeah. There's
And
also something from a
yeah,
confidence perspective. You hear
yeah,
yourself putting your personality into your answer and it relaxes you a little bit. So you're not in
absolutely.
this, testing mode, being a robot and having to be perfect. You hear your own personality coming through your voice.
Yes,
That's
for
great.
sure, right? And that can relax you, that lowers the stress. And
Yeah.
as when you're speaking fluidly, having these transition words, linking phrases, you will also be more confident because you're feeling that your speech is smooth, right? You're moving
Mhm.
smoothly between ideas instead of those like choppy, simple sentences you would use otherwise.
Yes.
Vocabulary was especially amazing here. You did use our phrases up to par, up to snuff. These are band 9 phrases. Instead of
Mhm.
saying good enough or pretty good, right? Use these
Mhm.
instead. And then legitimate, you use this amazing band 9 adjective to describe something as legitimate, which means it's trustworthy, it's, not fake. This is a
Mhm.
and some impressive pronunciation a few times.
Yeah.
On that first answer, when you said, the first thing I do, you're not saying it in a monotone, right? The first thing I do. You
Yeah.
want to emphasize words to switch up your tone, right, Lindsay?
Yes, great feedback, Aubrey. These are all strategic things our listeners can do and model in their exam to get that high score, right? Pronunciation, vocabulary, filler words, huge ways to boost your score.
Absolutely.
Okay, Aubrey, it's your turn. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Great. So remind me again how long the entire answer should be. Did we say 3 minutes?
Yeah, so we're aiming for about a minute for each of these answers.
Yeah. Okay.
So if I go longer, then you don't need to time me. I
Okay.
feel like we can just, because we're not in an actual IELTS exam where we have a stop
Yes.
time, right? But if
Right.
it feels like it's more than about a minute, you could go ahead and say thank you and ask the next question because I might get carried away,
You might get carried away. Who knows? Let's see how we
right?
do.
Yeah.
All right, Aubrey. So here is your first question. Are you ready?
Yes.
What do you think it might be like to work in a customer service job?
Ooh, I think it'd be tough. I have worked in customer service jobs in the past. I worked for Sears and I was calling people who had scheduled repair for appliances, refrigerators, washers, and dryers. And there was some kind of problem. The technician was late. And often people would be upset. So, this I think is the biggest, toughest thing about customer service is if you have someone on the phone, if you're dealing with someone who is angry, because then
Mhm.
they're not always as polite as you would like. So I would like to say that my customer service skills are always, up to snuff. But when someone's angry, I also have a hard time being polite in return. So I'm maybe not cut out for a customer service job.
Do you agree that customers are more likely to complain nowadays?
Absolutely. I think we have more venues for doing so. We can leave an anonymous online review where often people aren't as polite as they would be in real life. So, once upon a time, you had to either call them or maybe go into a business to let them know you were frustrated with the service. Now we can do this online, either with our name attached or without.
Mhm.
So, it's easier now and definitely happens more often.
Yeah. How important is it for companies to take all customer complaints seriously?
Yeah, this is extremely vital. Of course, you can lose a customer if you are ignoring complaints, because usually a problem that exists for one person, like if software isn't up to par and one user is having an issue, this is the same for many users. That's likely. So if you ignore that, then the customer experience is likely worse across the board. And that can be extremely problematic for companies that lose a lot of their customer base, a lot of their income. Companies could go bankrupt if they ignore something that's going wrong.
All right. Great answer, Aubrey. I love it. I love it. Excellent. I heard you use some key vocabulary here, like up to par is one thing you used. I believe you used up to snuff.
Yeah, I was talking about myself. I said, I hope
Mhm.
I'm, my customer service skills are up to snuff. And then I think I
Yep.
referred to the software as up to par. These
Yep.
are definitely, they're so high scoring, but you're definitely going to need practice adding them because it is our first instinct is just to say good or good enough, something much
Sure.
more lower scoring.
Yep. And I also like how you use the phrase once upon a time instead of saying before or,
Mm,
when I was younger or in a different time. It makes it feel like a bit more of a story and it's more unique. I would imagine that would get you a higher score for vocabulary.
absolutely. And it's
Mhm.
very native and natural to say that once upon a time, things
Yes.
were different. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. And then I want to emphasize one thing. So I actually responded to you. I said, "Yeah." And then I asked the next question, but our listeners definitely shouldn't expect any response from the examiner. Is that right? Or even like a
Yeah.
smile or a nod. I think generally they try to be very stoic and unresponsive. Is that
Yeah,
right?
they're not allowed. They're not allowed to respond or give you any indication of how you are doing. So if
Mhm.
ever they do, it's sort of accidental
Yeah.
because just like we do here sometimes, it's
Yeah.
in our nature as
Sure.
human beings to give,
Yes.
respond, to smile, say yeah, to agree a little bit. So that might an examiner might accidentally do that, but they get, they're so much more in the habit of not
Mhm.
responding that is what you should expect. No reaction at all, no smile, just
Yes.
asking the next question. And it will feel foreign
It
because
will.
people in your everyday conversations don't do that.
Especially depending on what culture, sometimes this can vary. The amount that we do this might vary from culture to culture. If you come
Right.
from a culture that really receives, what people say and really reflects back and a lot of yeah and physical responses, then
Absolutely.
you want to practice with a very stoic person role playing an examiner. Okay. Just
Yes,
be
right.
ready for it.
We've
Okay.
given the advice to print out a face of someone that's not
Oh,
smiling and like give your answers to that face if you don't have a person to talk to
I
so
love
that you
that.
get used to no reaction at all after your
Ooh.
answer. Don't let it throw you off.
That's really smart. That's
Yeah.
really smart. I love it. All right, Aubrey. Good job on your sample answers. Is there another episode our listeners should go to then
Yeah,
to
we just want to
get
make
into
sure you
series?
didn't miss. It was 1504. Is your IELTS
Mhm.
vocabulary up to snuff? So, this really is an amazing episode because you will definitely need to share your opinion. You'll need to say whether you think things are good or bad. You need higher scoring vocabulary for this. So, we showed you how to use some of these phrases in sample answers today, and don't miss that episode for a deep dive on all of those idioms.
Yes, we've done a lot of good stuff today, Aubrey. Our listeners got a lot out of today's episode. Where should we leave them? What should be our final thought today?
Yeah, it's not enough, guys, to be using less common vocabulary. You need to use idioms. You need expressions that not every student is using in order to boost your vocabulary score. This way, if your grammar score is a 6, no problem. Your overall score will be high because it's
Mhm.
pulled up by this impressive vocabulary. So definitely practice using this vocabulary to replace bad and good, which you are definitely going to need on IELTS.
I love it. So good, Aubrey. Well, we'll be back here next week and you have a good weekend. We'll talk to you very soon.
Awesome. You too. Thanks, Lindsay.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.